36, you never know.
Which one is up?
Whichever one you want it to. Glasses are fogging up. It's too warm in here. Usually doesn't do it with this little face cover. Man,
With the gator.
the gator, yeah, because it's real. It's efficient gator.
I have to have a wire. That's the only way I can keep mine from fogging up.
Keep it concealed.
Yeah, that's the only way that I've found to keep my glasses from fogging up. It's a struggle. I just wear contacts. But you're not supposed to. You're supposed to wear glasses. It's bad for you to wear contacts during COVID.
Bought a year supply a year ago.
I stopped wearing contacts like probably 10 years ago. It started as I wanted to sleep 5 more minutes because I'm that lazy. And then my allergies were so bad, like I was like wanting to scratch my eyeballs. Like I had to keep using all these. I was like, this is not worth it. Glasses are more fashionable than they were when I was in 5th grade. And I tell you, prescription sunglasses, they are a game changer. Best money I ever spent.
Hey, stranger.
Hey, how are you?
Not bad. How are you doing?
All right.
Is this seat taken?
No, there's only 4, so
Yeah.
how are you?
I'm not doing bad at all.
Oh,
I'll
carries.
raise you out.
Interesting, fair.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm coming.
Not in the classroom.
Oh, okay. Well, that solves that little dilemma that I was.
No comment, no comment.
Well, here's what I was doing. Actually, I accidentally bought a prop. Because if I have to wear a mask to buy beef jerky and a drink, why should my kids
Or
have
night before last.
Well, I think if your kid can be 60, you shouldn't have to wear it.
Okay. I mean, if you can say 6 feet or, yeah. So, anyway.
But I also think little kids can't.
No, little kids can't. That's right. The littles can't do
So
it.
I think that's the dilemma. Do you mandate something for 7 to 12
Yeah.
and not, and it's not like they're changing classes, they're pretty much doing the same spots.
Right.
Make sure you clarify about the classroom board.
I think this is the responsible way to do this.
That's a good look.
I know, right? You're like a Dodger. So where are you at?
Just discretion for the classroom.
Gun barn. Kathy's a blank one.
It's not a bad place.
No.
Charles here, so I give you.
There's a lot of people that say,
Gotcha.
population is such, well, you have to be a good person to come back next year.
I would think so.
Yeah, they're hard ain't at.
Is there any discussion on
That's
this?
the way it is.
That's what
I had a teacher get upset. Got a room on class, white light. I was in there observing
Just
the,
walk out of the class.
That sounds like easy glass. I've heard some crazy stories.
just down the road,
Oh, yeah.
that's where the
Oh,
kids.
no, I've heard. I have a friend who taught at Sandusky and had some other friends who taught at glass.
Mhm.
When she was telling me about kids throwing desks at the teacher, I was like, yeah, I understand now. Why'd you walk out of the classroom?
I had a kid run down the hall, run into me, I brushed, he was about this tall, run down the hall, run into me, full speed. Look at it, and I was wondering, hey, you need to go back to the end of the hall and come back. He said, you can't make me do nothing. And I'm looking down like this, I said, seems to me like you're not good at math right now.
Because, like I said, depending on what we do on these two, that's going to change people's minds on what they're going to do.
Hey there, how are you doing?
We got some here, especially if you pushes.
I am.
right off to
Good, good. Hi guys.
How are you?
Doing well.
Hello.
Here I am.
Oh, good.
17 August,
Hey, Gregory, the apple is hot.
no later.
Oh, okay. I just got two. So everyone can get this stuff.
Oh, that's-
You know I'm not a quiet person.
There it is. Ah.
rewind and replay.
I know, I'm trying
No later than. No later than.
I give away the combinations of the safe that had the queen's jewels in it this time, or was that other time?
Hey, extracurricular students, not just sports. Action.
Just a second. I just need to ask you something.
One second.
Just a second. How are you feeling?
How's everybody?
Yeah.
I think they just did this in case we moved. I think they just did this in case we moved.
I do have my.
Yeah, please.
Where am I at?
I don't know.
My imaginary friend has one.
I don't have one?
Yeah, you know me. I had a coupon.
Yes, Jennifer, I don't know that you were on the list. Instead,
We're so long.
That's cool, I'll sit back. No, it's okay. I'm good. I'm good.
Yeah, but they could do, I got texted, I got.
Oh, can't we?
I had three people that texted me like, they can't see.
All right. Okay, how are you?
How you doing?
Good, how are you?
How you
care.
Football Hall of Fame has an enshrinement ceremony for the league.
How are ya?
You got to. We know that happens.
My daughter is getting on this kick lately and everything is.
I wish my daughter was on a kick where she's actually smiling.
She going back?
She is. She's going back next Saturday.
How many classes does she have? That's
Yeah, inside the state
there.
She's got 2 that are blended, partially on campus, and the rest are off. No, she said if they go virtual, though, she's coming home. I mean, we're paying pretty hefty for an apartment,
Yeah.
so.
I really good news.
I don't know.
No questions, no questions.
Is Marley going back, or is she saying with y'all and doing, is it online, or? No, they're on campus, that's right. You should know that.
You should know that, right?
I should, I don't know what I was,
But it could change.
yeah.
So, and Brinkley's there too this year.
Oh, really? Oh. Awesome.
Hey, Jordan. Good. How about you?
Okay.
No, we didn't put a spot for her out. You want me to get her today? Get her name
Not sure if
tag?
I need that sweater or not. Comfortable now.
Dad never get the call. Put on a sweater, I'm sick.
Go with that direction.
I just share with you.
Congratulations.
Oh, actually, no. That'd be nice.
It's like moving to the adult table. Big kids table.
That was the only winter I ever got cold my whole life.
He's on that. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm still on it.
Yeah.
I totally lost my explanation of my daughter ran.
You don't have.
It's Jennifer.
Tell her that the ringer's off.
BCPS YouTube channel. I think you can make it through.
You can go straight to YouTube as well.
YouTube and search Bedford County Public Schools.
If you just, you go to YouTube and you type in Bedford County Public Schools, it comes up. Yeah.
Good.
I just want to be consistent.
Yes, yes, he said, they can come in and sit in one of the chairs, but not the equipment. So they've decided, I think, to set up in the parking lot.
Absolutely.
How are you doing? Is your creek running?
That creek's flowing. I haven't been there. I don't know how much rain we got
Yeah, your
today.
whole backyard, I see.
It starts on the side of my house and goes all the way down to town pond.
Oh, well. I actually, my husband finally said to me, you know, you are absolutely insane in medication because we live on a country road. Some of the trees and stuff were starts to grow over that, the little area that you mow with your mower. And so I was out there chopping them down. And he's coming home from work, he goes, you are mentally ill. And I said, well, you know, the county, the state's not gonna do it.
I'm sure he said it with the deepest of affection.
He did, he did. He just said, I know you have a mental illness, and he said, you know, if you took one more pill a day, you might feel better. Instead of taking, he said, take two. And I said, and my daughter was helping me, and she just looked at me, I know, she's just like crazy. So,
We actually bought a wood chipper.
oh, did you, do they work okay?
They so far so good, and that's my son's job to run the wood chipper. He gets paid well.
How is that?
Good evening, sir.
Yeah,
You say
this-
your son ran it?
I taught him how to run it. So we'll run it together and then I pay him well. That's the way he earns money right now.
Does it really make good mulch? Or
Good enough, I think my blades are getting a little dull, but, yeah, it does good.
What's the diameter you can put in there?
Up to 3/4 of an inch.
3/4 of an inch?
But then ours also has a feeder for bigger limbs.
Oh,
How about you?
gotcha, gotcha.
And then anything else, we're cutting up firewood because we're building a fire pit too.
Yeah. That's nice. Hello, Mr. Connor, Dr. Connor. How are you? Good. How many more years do you have?
Wow, that's kind of personal, Dr. Mueller.
Oh, I know it is, but you,
Well, I'm getting
If you
closer
don't
to
wanna answer.
65 every day.
huh?
I said I'm getting closer to 65 every day.
I know, well, when I retired, you said, yeah, no, I'm getting ready, it's not too many more years.
Yeah.
These Gator scars.
I'm
Trying
telling
to
you.
get, trying to get closer to some of the medical benefits.
Yeah, that's what you said before, yeah, that's important, but I'll tell you what, it's the best.
You know, I haven't talked to anybody that said they haven't enjoyed it immensely and it wasn't the best decision they made.
Let's see, Miss Georgia, I know you.
Excuse me?
He's family Florida.
I did. They're in the Greenville area now.
Oh,
And they're and local, so between those two.
oh, that's good, man.
But taking a trip to Wyoming is in about 2 weeks to explore some stuff, so who knows what'll eventually happen.
Oh, you are or your family?
No, the ones that are in South Carolina.
That's pretty country out there.
Never been, but I'm told that there's possibly a spring trip for.
Ah, all right.
Thank you. Yeah, I've never been.
Yeah, there are parts of the West that are, I love being there, but there's a lot of parts that are just kind of too dry for me. I'm so used to the green. But it's very, I mean, you don't have the land formations, you know, there's nothing like that back here. In fact, I often think, you know, when people from the West come camping east, they must like, these are the mountains, this is it, this is all you got.
Yeah, for sure.
Susan?
Hey, Dr. Hicks, how are you?
Dr. Hicks.
How are you, Susan?
Oh, I'm sorry, I get confused when two Susans
I
now.
know, we just both answer, it's okay.
Doesn't take much to confuse me anymore anyway.
I'll give up.
I know, there was one that wasn't working very well.
Your rise up. Mark, yes, sir. I think that some of these items, mic, earphones, what we do here. Maybe move them. I think that one's. Okay. Just because I think that's something that's. Right. That makes sense.
There he is. How are you?
It's like if any, enjoy the cold,
Blacksburg.
pull it off and be out.
Okay.
They don't have fans.
Yeah,
Oh, that's right, you told me.
I'm watching.
Hey, Georgia.
How are you?
Oh, yes.
How are you, Jason?
I heard that too. Well, if there's any sport that's made for television, it's the NFL. Players would get us fired up now. They can be proud of me. I heard that one. I think college would be worse because a lot of those stadiums have bleacher seating and a much larger attendance.
I've never been to one of those.
Yeah, I've been to Tennessee, Alabama, and I've been to Penn State.
And you tell when
They all
somebody's
have
touched.
100,000.
Yeah, right. I've not ever been to one.
It's pretty remarkable. And we would be lucky if we got like 15,000 fans most games.
Right.
Call the August 13th, 2020 special call meeting to order. Ms. Johnson, please call a roll.
Mr. Leamy?
Here.
Mrs. Kirby?
Here.
Mrs. Hairston?
Here.
Dr. Hicks?
Here.
Mr. Hill?
Here.
Mr. Johnson?
Here.
Dr. Mealy?
Here.
Mr. Chairman, you have a quorum.
Thank you, ma'am. Do I have a motion to approve the agenda as written?
I so move, Mr. Chairman.
I have a motion by Dr. Mealy, do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Dr. Hicks, discussion.
Yes, Chairman. I was just curious if it might be possible to move 2.01 down to between 04 and 05, since the topics below that may impact that discussion.
We can do that. I mean, I think that, I think that's, we can do that because Dr. Hicks also had asked.
Oh, okay.
Does anybody have any objection to moving 2.01 to You're talking between 2.04 and 2.05?
Yes, sir.
Okay. We've got a motion to move item number 2.01 down between 2.04 and 2.05. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second, Dr. Hicks. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. The agenda is amended. Okay, just some comments. Special call meeting tonight is to consider action items directly related to the opening of school. We've received presentations. We've gotten, everyone here is like I am, we've gotten plenty of constituent input. And I'm sure we've conducted our own due diligence and done our own homework. So I would suspect that everyone sitting around this table right now is pretty much has an idea of where they stand on these various action items. Having said this, we will not be having presentations by staff. However, staff members are here available to answer any questions that board members may have that may tilt your decision one way or the other. First item, item 2.02, face coverings. Do I have a motion to require face coverings on the bus and indoors in public spaces when social distancing is not possible and at teacher's discretion in classroom?
Mr. Chairman, I offer a motion that we move forward with those areas that you just listed.
Okay, we've got a motion by Ms. Hairston. Do we have a second?
Second.
I'm sorry, could you repeat that, please?
Yes, sir. Require face coverings, a motion to require face coverings on the bus and indoors in public spaces when social distancing is not possible and at teacher's discretion in classroom. Have a motion, do I have a second?
Second.
Second, Mr. Hill. Does anybody have any questions regarding this particular action item?
I do.
Yes, sir.
I would like to see it change from at teacher discretion to face masks being required by all students inside the building.
Okay, is there any other discussion?
Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
So I'm just curious, if it's required, what are we thinking in terms of enforcement? Like, would there be penalties if a student doesn't wear a face covering? Or would this just be a warning, a discussion about the importance of face masks, awareness of respect for other people in the classroom? Like, what is the enforcement mechanism for that?
Enforcement mechanism would be at discretion of the building administrator principal.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I think it's hugely important that we're very clear that when we say public spaces, that would be all the hallways, cafeteria, commons areas, and that basically we're getting down to if a child is at their desk, which is 6 feet apart from someone else, doing independent work, then they would be able to remove their mask with their teacher's permission. I think we have to be very clear about when this is going to occur. So they should have their mask on like car riders, when they're arriving to school, when they get to school, walking in the hallways, and then probably in the morning as they are unpacking their bags and getting ready for the day. But if they are at their desk, which I have seen pictures that they are 6 feet apart, then that would be a time that they could remove their mask.
Again, that would be a teacher's discretion in the classroom. And most teachers, I'm sure, will be cognizant, and it does specifically say when social distancing is not possible. Therefore, if they're following the social distancing in the classroom, then that would allow masks to be removed. So I think we've covered that in the motion.
May I ask a question?
Yes.
Ms. Robertson, because all of us here have our own mask, but I know typically I've made numerous trips myself to the school to take stuff that my children have forgotten. Will there be disposable masks handy for the children that do forget it for the day?
Yes, ma'am, we do have disposable face masks available.
Will they be in the office or will each teacher have a set?
We hadn't planned, being candid, part of this decision will influence how we have those accessible in the school. If they are now going to be required when students move in any common spaces as a requirement rather than an encouragement, we would make sure that teachers have those available.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions?
Yes, sir.
When we say at the discretion of the teacher, are we talking about the teacher allow them to have like a mask break? Are we talking about the students being allowed to wear their mask in the classroom all day long if they're at their individual learning spaces?
As long as they're observing social distancing, they would not be required to wear their masks unless the teacher felt that social distancing was not being observed in the classroom, then he or she could require the student to wear their mask in the classroom. Does that make sense?
That does. I disagree with that, but it makes sense.
Mr. Chairman, and I
Yes,
just
ma'am.
want to be clear too, so the discretion of the teacher only exists in the classroom space,
Correct.
not in
In the
hallways
classroom,
or any
just-
common spaces.
correct.
And this would also include our staff as well, correct?
Yes. Any other questions?
So, Mr. Chairman, just to make sure I completely understand, so if I'm in the hallway,
Yes,
mask required,
correct.
if I am socially distanced in my classroom, it's not teacher discretion, it is, unless, maybe I'm working in a small group, I'm mask free at that point.
Correct.
Okay.
Well, if you're working in a small group, then
Well,
you.
no,
Just
if you're,
required, yes.
yes, you need to have it. If you are socially distanced within that classroom, you're not required to wear the mask unless the teacher feels that, okay, you guys are not, you're getting to 3 feet instead of 6, then you need to put your mask back on.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, ma'am.
if I may just also just ask for some clarification. So if I'm understanding things correctly, when we say teacher discretion,
Yes,
then we are certainly indicating that we're empowering the teacher to make that decision when he or she feels that it's necessary for the child to wear the mask because they are not adhering to
correct.
the 6 feet distance.
Yes, ma'am.
And some of those scenarios could certainly be in small group settings. Oftentimes at an elementary level and even middle and high school, there may be times where the teacher's gonna have to give perhaps maybe direct one-on-one instruction or guidance to a child. And we find that students get up out of their seats oftentimes to go and maybe get some Germ-X, to get a Kleenex and things like that, and they may come pretty close to another student. And so I think, again, empowering that teacher, giving her that discretion to make that decision to let the student know that, Johnny, you need to put your mask on because you're at this particular distance.
Yes,
The teachers cannot change the rule of social distancing.
correct.
Thank you.
Other questions? Okay, we got a motion, we got a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
Ms. Johnson, please follow the board.
Ms. Harrison,
Yes.
Dr. Hicks,
No.
Mr. Hill,
Yes.
Mr. Johnson,
Yes.
Mrs. Kirby,
Yes.
Mr. Leamy,
Yes,
Dr. Mealy.
Yes.
Guys have it with 6.
thank you, ma'am.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, ma'am.
Following that too, I'd just like to know if we could ask our central office staff to, many parents have expressed concerns that these masks might be on the floor or on the desk, or the kids are touching them too much when they're taking them on and off. And I would just like to see if staff could, the central office staff could help, and with principals, whomever they would be best able to solve this, to come up with a method of trying to secure them so that they do remain with the child. And one idea is to get lanyards and have them, with a clip, and have them clip a plastic bag to it, and then their mask goes in that bag so it doesn't go all over the floor. I'm not saying that's what we have to do, I'm just saying that was one parent's idea, and I did get a lot of concern regarding how we were going to help them when they remove their mask to keep it
Ms. Robertson,
as
tag your
sanitary as possible.
Got it. 2.03, Temperature screenings. Do I have a motion to require temperature screenings on students and staff upon arrival at school or their place of work?
I so move.
I have a motion by Dr. Mealy. Do I have a second?
I second.
Second by Ms. Hairston. Questions or discussion?
I have a question.
Yes.
And this may be far-fetched, but this is just my way of thinking. What is, unfortunately, it's gonna be inevitable that it's gonna hit. But what is the plan for quarantine when a student does come down, a student or a teacher comes down with it? What is the plan?
I'm sorry, I didn't know if it was staff, Dr. Connor.
Whoever can
Okay,
answer.
Why don't you start then?
Okay, if a child is in school and begins to present with any symptoms, they're gonna be assessed by the nurse. If those symptoms, and they have a protocol for evaluating things that are characteristic of COVID presentation in children and things that are also just characteristic of illness in children. So they're gonna do a specific assessment designed to examine symptoms and also make sure that they work to make sure they have knowledge of the student's baseline. We have students with some respiratory conditions that are pre-existing. So that first step would start with the nursing assessment. If there are respiratory symptoms or symptoms that seem to align with the COVID suspected presentation, that child would be placed in isolation and would be indicated for immediate pickup for an emergency contact. Now, as we've said in previous meetings, we can only advise parents in terms of what are appropriate next steps. If that was a symptom suspected profile of COVID, that family would be advised to pursue medical consultation and that it may be appropriate to consider assessment for COVID-19. If that indication is positive, if we have a positive indication, we would receive notification as contact tracers through the Department of Health. That would likely come from a parent just as quickly as the Department of Health. But then we would immediately activate the notification protocols identifying what cohort or pod or group that student had been in, and then begin to do assessments of what, if any, individuals had close contact with the student in question. If we've established that close contact, those adults and or families would be notified of that close contact to begin their quarantine or self-isolation because they've had a close contact exposure.
Would the quarantine be mandatory or optional?
I think we would have an obligation that if we had an understanding of a student being indicated for close contact and advised for quarantine, we would probably indicate to the parent that the student should remain at home and would not be admitted in the same way that we have, you have to be fever-free for 24 hours before you come back to school.
And that applies to the ones that have had contact with that student.
If they have been advised as a close contact that they should isolate because of the exposure risk, yes, ma'am.
So define close contact, does that mean anyone in that classroom?
Not necessarily. We are talking about close contact by Department of Health is defined as less than 6 feet of distance for more than 15 minutes.
Then and I'm not sure, I know this will be out of your realm, so I'm not sure who's going to answer this next question. Then if we are if someone chooses to, or they need to quarantine, and if someone wants to take an extra precautionary measure, knowing that a child in, say my child in my child's classroom was affected, and I would want to quarantine my child as a safety measure.
Mm-hmm.
How would truancy come into play if I wanted to quarantine my child?
And I can answer or you can because I know you've been involved with a lot of the attendance.
So the State Department has given us some guidance that as long as we're having meaningful interactions with students, when there's concerns from parents or staff about exposure to COVID-19, then we could say to you as a parent, if you're quarantining, as long as you're participating and we're having direct contact with you every day and your child is working, then they would be more lenient with truancy. It would only be if you just disappeared and did nothing, or your child did nothing for 4, 5, 6 days, then we would start to be concerned. So I think there's gonna be a lot of leniency there and their protocols coming.
Any other questions?
Mr. Chairman, I
Yes,
do
ma'am.
have another question for Ms. Robertson, and you may have shared this, so just for clarification for me. So we have a child that's been identified as having COVID, and so will we be notifying the teacher? Is the teacher someone that will also be told that, you know, this child in your classroom has COVID?
I think, and I don't want to speak definitively because with HIPAA protections, the requirement is an individual that has had close contact. However, I think it would be reasonable to anticipate that in most classroom conditions, a teacher would be the person that was probably in closest contact with the student. However, there could be the likelihood that upon interview, the teacher would say, I'm thinking about some of the older students. He was at the back of the room at his desk all day. We weren't really in close contact. In that situation, we may not specifically indicate that a student is positive or not, because then we're disclosing personally protected health information. So.
Any other questions?
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Johnson?
Thought it might be interesting that about 3 hours ago, Dr. Fauci was interviewed on Facebook Live, and he says that temperature checks are notoriously inaccurate, and does not really recommend it, because he said in the summer, a temperature could read as high as 103 if you'd just been outside in the summer air and sun. And I've read numerous articles lately that have discussed the false positives that Ms. Robertson was discussing last week, and I even had one mom tell me that her child was late for a few appointments because the sun hitting her face in the car ride over gave the temperature or the thermometer a false reading. And when you read more information about how a fever is only one of many symptoms, not everyone, I heard maybe as much as half of COVID patients don't have a manifested fever. I'm not sure that temperature checks alone are going to be a sufficient predictor of who is COVID infected and who is not, so.
Any other questions?
Mr. Chairman?
comments? Yes.
Yes, and I agree with some of what you said, but I think the thing we have to remember is that none of us sitting around this table or in this room are medical people. I've gotten, I have a stack of information from the CDC, from the, the Virginia Department of Health, from the Harvard Medical School, from, a bunch of places that always keeps coming back to, as many intervention mitigation strategies as you can do. I've heard from dozens and dozens of parents who are very concerned because they think this should be done. And I think that, the Harvard Medical School was, probably one of the things that Professor Hazelton there that really said, you don't know who's a carrier, who's not a carrier. They are asymptomatic. But I think if you need to try to do everything that you can to ensure that the kids coming into a building are as free from any sort of symptoms as you can possibly be. And just as a school board member, I'm not a doctor, so I really worry. I want to be able to go home.
Not that kind of doctor.
Yes, not that kind of doctor. I want to be able to go home at night and lay my head down and know that I did everything I could to protect not only our children but our staff. Because what are you going to say to someone who this is not a case of, if, it's a case of when. I mean, our positivity rates are going up in this county. We currently have community spread, although it is slow, we still have it, but our positivity rate has increased 2% in 5 weeks. And so what do you say to somebody, our teachers are asking for this, what do you say to somebody who gets sick and possibly has long-term effects from this? I personally can't lay my head down at night and say, I did everything. I'd rather do everything I possibly could do. Even if it's, you get some false positives or, it causes some extra minutes in the day to know that our students and our staff are coming to a place that we have made as secure an environment as we possibly can.
Okay, anybody else? Questions?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes,
just one other question,
Yes.
or just suggestion here in terms of temperature screenings. I wonder in terms of how are we, if we were to vote for this, how we would implement this. And I know in some previous meetings, we have talked about how that would be sort of problematic. And I would like to suggest that we empower our principals and our school staff to develop a plan. I think that they certainly have very astute problem-solving skills and can create a plan that certainly would be able to screen the students as they enter into the building. I would also suggest that there's that perhaps maybe a plan that Dr. Shook has used in the past. I think it was the Bliss, if I remember during my years, where members of the central office staff would come out and support and help the various schools during that first week of school. Asking those who may be assigned to a school to perhaps maybe help the principals and the school staff with temperature checks. So that's a suggestion that I would have, because I think it's important for us to at least set some guidelines and provide our principals and staff with some support and help.
Okay, anyone else?
Can I ask?
Yes.
Ms. Robertson, you touched on this briefly before with the notifications and the quarantine. Now, what I'm envisioning is students lined up, thermometer held to their head. If they have a fever, asking them to step aside. Wouldn't that be a violation of HIPAA, because at that point in time, that child is identified in front of everyone?
I think that's one of many concerns about mass screening procedures.
So how difficult would it be to go around doing a temperature check without potentially violating HIPAA?
Well, I think there are many things to consider when we're thinking about the student's experience. I can speak to the logistics again if that's needed, but in terms of the student experience, at a time when we also want to be very sensitive to any social isolation or social teasing that could occur, a student who may have been isolated first thing in the morning for an inaccurate reading, perhaps, as are very common with the thermal reads, maybe just got out of a heated car or off of a hot bus in summer. Any student that could be excluded, that would be public. And so as that child returns to the classroom later in the day, having checked completely clear, I would not want students to have any sort of negative response to that student, and understand certainly that the student was not presenting with any illness. We can't always control kids' behaviors and their reactions to those things. So I think if we were thinking about the discretion, it is very clear if we have students gathered in any sort of experience that when you are taken out of a line or when you are removed or when you are asked to leave, there's a reason. So that would instantly create suspicion amongst other children. That's one of the worries, the logistics are certainly more of a concern for me in terms of increasing the likelihood of students then having more contacts in the day with more people, because we are now having to move students to other areas for holding and rescreening.
Thank you.
Dr. Hicks?
One concern that I have is if the schools take on the responsibility of checking temperatures, then the parents will not be doing it as much at home, because they're saying, well, the teacher will do it at school. And then the kid's on the school bus for 30 minutes with 22 other kids spreading COVID. And when he gets to school, they find out he has it, and it's too late for those 22 kids.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes,
I certainly hear Dr. Hicks' point, and I think it's a very valid one too, Dr. Hicks. I also believe that that it's so important as another safeguard for us to have the temperature check. I believe that our principals, if they are given the okay to develop a plan, I trust that they would be able to do that and do it in such a discreet and protective manner for those students. We have to, as principals, come up, and Dr. Hicks, you know this, we come up with plans sometimes at the very last minute. And certainly I don't think any of our principals would not want to, they would ensure that the child certainly is protected and we'll deal with any acts of embarrassment or teasing from other students. I just think we need to trust our principals to do this and empower the schools in which to do it. And it's another safeguard. And as a board member, I think it's just crucial that we keep and we put these safeguards in place, the mask wearing and the temperature screenings.
Are there any other questions from Ms. Robertson? Okay, we got a motion, we got a second, we've had discussion and questions. All those in favor signify by saying
Yeah,
aye.
I'm sorry, can
Yes.
you repeat the motion is to require temperature
Motion
checks.
is to require temperature screenings on students and staff upon arrival at school.
Thank you.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
Please follow the board. Ms. Johnson?
Harrison,
Yes.
Dr. Hicks,
No.
Mr. Hill,
No.
Mr. Johnson,
No.
Mrs. Kirby,
No.
Mr. Leamy,
No.
Dr. Mealy,
Yes.
Okay.
have it.
Motion fails. 2.04 Bedford Connects enrollment. I think we've got a couple of moving pieces on this. Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Point of clarification on face coverings. I didn't hear in the motion anything mentioned about medical exemptions, and there are some districts who have imposed policies of this nature who say if a student is asthmatic or respiratory, adult, student, whatever, their doctor says they shouldn't be wearing a face covering, that is an exemption. Others have taken a more hard line and said, if that is the case, then the employee cannot serve or student cannot attend, they have to choose remote, and we're just seeking some clarification before we start implementing that.
Well, if there's a, and correct me if I'm wrong, if there is a medical concern of any kind for a student, then that student, I think, it's in their best interest to choose the remote option and not tempt fate.
Is that saying they can't come to school if they can't wear a mask? Or saying that if they
Well,
can,
if
they
they
can
have-
still come with the doctor saying documentation from the doctor?
Correct me if I'm wrong, but the guidance from the state of Virginia states that if you have a legitimate medical exemption, then you do not have to wear a mask. Am I wrong? Okay, well then what are we talking about?
That's the rule.
That's guidance from the governor.
Okay, we just wanted to make sure other districts have, even with that, have taken a harder line where if kids are all walking down the hallway and the rule's been established, you have to wear a mask in the hallway, they're advising those kids to choose the remote option. And so we just wanted some clarification.
Are we going to require any verification of the medical exemption, or a doctor's note, or anything of that nature?
I think it would
I
be
think so,
possible.
yeah.
Yeah, we have to.
Can we require that based on HIPAA laws?
If it's private and the parents release it,
Yeah.
parents release the
I'm
information.
asking the question now,
Is that
yeah.
correct?
If that were to be the direction that the board were to ask us to pursue, that would probably be a point of health-to-health provider communication, and that would be communicated to the school nurse and contained as part of the health record. Now, there would obviously be the public display of not wearing a face covering, but the reasons behind that would be contained as part of the health record.
Everybody understand? Okay.
Thank you.
2.04 Bedford Connects enrollment. As I mentioned, we've got a couple of pieces to this. How many, Dr. Shook, how many right now are on the list?
On the list as in or on the list as waiting?
Waiting.
351 as of 4 p.m.
351, okay.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman, can we get the total number of enrollment? Is it still the 2,300 and something?
It's 2,224.
Without the waiting list, correct?
without the waiting list, and then the waiting list is 351.
So there's two things that we really need to consider here. Do we enroll the students on the waiting list? And then the second piece to that, if so, do we hire staff to support the additional students who are enrolled in Bedford Connects using CARES funds? So, do I have a motion to enroll all students on the Bedford CARES waiting list who are on there as of 17 August 2020 at 5 p.m.?
So moved.
I have a motion by Mr. Hill. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Ms. Kirby. Discussion?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
If we are changing the mask rules in midstream here, that should we not give the parents who made the choice based on the rules at that time a chance to change to the virtual program?
That's what we're doing. That's why today's the 13th. They've got 14th, 15th, 16th, 17th.
Okay.
So extend it to Monday at 5
They've
o'clock
got
is
4
the absolute
days,
deadline to
4
sign
days
up.
to make that decision based on the new information regarding the masks and the decision not to do temperature screening. Does that answer your question, sir?
It does. I guess, how will the public know that we've made the changes that we made tonight?
That's incumbent on staff to get the word out to all families that are enrolled in Bedford County Public Schools. I mean, that's just something that's got to be done. But the bottom line is here, we've got to have a hard deadline. And, I think we've been very generous with the deadline thus far, but, we gotta get the ball rolling on getting kids back to school by either in-person, hybrid, or virtually. We've got to draw the line. And so this motion draws that line on Monday, the 17th of August at 5 p.m.
So we're gonna try and notify everybody tomorrow of the decision we made tonight?
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Can Dr. Shook explain to us how he's going to do that, since there is a very short time period?
Well, I don't know, because I was just told, but we will use every means available to us. We have email blasts, we have calls, we have our Facebook broadcast. We could try to do something like that. I believe that the challenge here is going to be trying to convey in those messages with enough clarity that people understand, and hopefully direct them to some written guidance that we could put on our website and our FAQs that leave absolutely no doubt of what's happening. The previous guidance that we listed had a deadline of what date? July 24th, and even as of today, and maybe because this meeting was happening, folks continue to roll in, and we will hear that people were on vacation and they weren't checking their phone, and they just didn't know, and so we'll do everything we can. My experience tells me we will have people coming in after that deadline begging us to do that. Having said that, I think as a staff, we agree there should be a deadline. Whether that's Monday at 5 or an earlier date or a later date, I think we could debate. The other way we could handle this is kind of the way we've handled it even with this group, is to make that the deadline, but still allow people to be on a new wait list, but not guarantee, and pretty much tell them it probably won't happen and they should prepare for not doing it. Or we can just say no. My concern, as I've shared publicly last weekend in the email, is if these are families that are late and will not choose public school, if this is not the option, I just think we need to consider our position in that.
Mr. Hill? Yeah, Mr. Chairman. So can we give, like Dr. Shook said, let's go ahead and accept what we're voting on and the numbers, give the deadline and accept those through the deadline, and then if that waiting list is created, unless it gives us a budget change where where it's going to affect the budget that we're, or head count that we're talking about, then we're okay with that being accepted into Bedford Connects.
Well, I mean, personally, I would have thought that we would have continued the wait list in the event that somehow, some way that there were openings that did occur. And that may be the case because some folks may now feel comfortable sending students to in person.
That's true too.
So, these are all things that we have to take into consideration, but I see no problem with allowing a wait list to accrue with the understanding that no promises, no guarantees.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, ma'am.
what was the date again? Did you say the 17th?
17th, Monday.
Is
Monday.
it possible to do just one more day because they have tomorrow, but Saturday and Sunday, nobody's there to receive their call that, I'd like to change?
Well, I'll throw that out to staff. I mean, what do you think a reasonable deadline is? Because, we need to put a hard deadline down here. And you all need to have that hard deadline in order to allocate staff, hire new staff is required. I mean, this is for the benefit of staff.
Dr. Woodford, you have your opinion?
I think if we just put the calls out tomorrow, I think we need to give them through Monday.
Sunday, Friday?
You're okay with COB, 5 o'clock on Monday? Okay. Yes, Mr. Johnson.
Your motion, did I hear you say something about hiring new staff to support?
Yeah, we've got to do this before we can do that. Does that
Okay.
make sense?
It does, yeah. I was just curious if that meant hire new staff or just shift staff that we have in the schools to support Bedford Connects. We're actually talking about.
And I may have not been clear in the email I sent you all yesterday, but our intent would be initially to do the shifting. However, what we're asking is if you all are comfortable, if what these additional 351 plus any more that come in by Monday, where they fall in terms of grade levels and courses and all the things that our team is trying to put together. If there's not a logical way to make that shift, not just because the folks aren't available, but without severely adversely impacting the in-person and blended plans that our principals have already developed, would you be okay with us here and there hiring new staff that we're not budgeted for out of one-time money from CARES Act with the understanding with those staff that those were one-year agreements and not ongoing, and just tell them, we kind of need you in this season and we can't, if you're good, we try to keep you longer than a year, but it wouldn't be like everybody else who's on a contract where we expect that to recur, and we just, the shifting we can do without your blessing because that's already budgeted and we've already kind of publicized that. The other we hadn't talked about, and with the amount of revenue we're talking about, we feel like it's fiscally prudent if we had to hire a handful more to go ahead and do that and to just make this all happen, but only if we have to. I mean, Mr. Hagler, do you want to chime in? You and I have talked about this.
I've been the one giving, warnings until you have your membership numbers and trying not to do that. And we've done a great job at that. We haven't added any FTEs to the budget to date. That being said, the instructional department and mainly our high schools and middle schools and setting their schedules, when you get this close to the start of school, you just all of a sudden pull somebody out. And typically 10 days before we start school, we're saying we're not pulling anybody else, lock your schedules, get them out. So as we get closer to the start of school, this many kids coming into Bedford Connects, if you go back to those schools and start pulling out, we'll try to do that, but that can be problematic for the base schools. So I think the instructional department said, if it's that problematic, we may have to hire to not disrupt that base school because of all this flux. Did I state that correctly, Dr. Woodford? And so I think it'd be a limited number. I don't think we're talking like 20 positions, you know, it'd be a handful. And we try to minimize that, try not to do it at all. But, you know, with those high school schedules, it's problematic as far as the content areas.
I'm curious, and you all may not have these numbers down solid yet, and I understand that, but I'm just curious about the current class ratio at the Bedford Connect. Can you give us some numbers here in terms of what that's gonna look like? Starting maybe with the elementary level and then moving on to middle and high?
Sure. Kindergarten right now is about 30 per teacher, 33 per teacher. And as we shift and we get new enrollments and those still come over, that is going higher unless we change staff with this. First grade is about 40. And second grade is about 35, 40 as well, per teacher. Third grade currently is about 40 per teacher. And then fourth and up is departmentalized, which means they are teaching everybody from that particular content that they have.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
Now, these 351 children that are on the waiting list, are those children just going to be placed into the already existing groups that we have?
I think that's going to depend on what kind of staff we hire and in what grade levels.
So,
For example, 11th grade only has 17 children on the wait list right now.
Mhm.
If you just split those 17 children among the grade levels that they're taking by semester, we may be able to absorb those without hiring any more teachers in the 11th grade.
right, so they would go to the already existing cohort.
Some of them, yeah. I think it depends on the numbers per grade level and the subjects that they are taking.
Right, in other words, we're not gonna say we have, I'm just gonna pick me, you're teaching first grade and you have with 3 other people, and then we have first graders coming in and I'm going to take all of those first graders, we're gonna put them in the group and divide them.
Yes,
Is that
because I
right?
would want to equalize it, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions?
Ms. Boyer, you kept saying hire, but you really mean hire or shift?
Yes.
Yes, just so we're clear, we're not.
Yes. We're just-
And Mr. Chairman, I just have one more thing.
Yes.
Someone could, I'd love to see just a breakdown of classes and how many kids are in classes that are in person too, just in a school.
Do you want that as of now or after they
That's not,
do the
After
three?
they-
that's not
yeah.
what we're considering right now.
I understand that, I'm just throwing that out there, I want a staff report for that.
Not a problem. Yeah, well, that's not what. Any other questions? Okay, I'll repeat. Can I have a motion to enroll the students on the waiting list for Bedford Connects through 17 August 2020 at 5 p.m.?
I so move.
Okay, motion by Dr. Mealy. Do I have a second?
I second.
Second, Ms. Hairston. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Now, the second piece to this, which we have already discussed. Do I have a motion to hire additional Bedford Connects staff to support additions to the program using CARES Act money?
So moved.
A motion by Mr. Hill, do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Dr. Higgs. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Can I ask a
Aye.
question?
Yes. You may.
So just to clarify though, this will be done conservatively and only when shifts cannot happen.
Let me clarify, when they can't happen or if making them would so disrupt a school from its plan to deliver in person or blended, but yes, as conservatively as possible for what Mr. Hackler said and to what I just said.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, try this again.
Sorry.
It's okay. I got ahead of myself. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Okay, motion passes. 2.01 calendar. I think that having covered some of the previous items, a calendar modification is in order. Before I ask for a motion, what, as far as how much time do you need?
Okay, so a number of us talked about this this week since it's been on the agenda. And I'll share, but staff, if you disagree, again, we haven't completely vetted this because we didn't know what was gonna happen tonight. But my personal opinion is that we should hold with what we've already published for the in-person at the elementary and the middle school. And the reason I feel like that is because that's the age group where there are significant implications for childcare for our families who have not had their kids in school since March and have probably had to make a lot of sacrifices with their employers and in their personal lives. And we need to get these kids back in school, in my opinion. And so the other thing is, and correct me if I'm wrong, Dr. Whitford or anybody else, most, if not all of those schools have already reached out to families and talked about teacher assignments and things of that nature. So the kids have been geared up by their families about you're gonna start school. And even though it may not be perfect, our transportation folks and our nutrition folks and everybody else, and just as a reminder, this is gonna be in-person instruction. And even though it's gonna look different with everything we're doing with the cohort groupings, and it's gonna be an adjustment, it's still traditional face-to-face instruction. And so there will certainly be things to work through, but I'd like to recommend that we stick with that. With the other, I think we could use another week. And I would prefer not, if the board's comfortable, maybe even give us 24 hours to process all this and figure out if a week is too much or not enough, unless the board really wants to make this decision tonight. At a previous meeting, you all authorized us to make these calendar changes as needed. But it seems like in just a few conversations, there is a happy medium that we're trying to reach between having enough time to plan and get this right, but not extend it so far out that, again, these children that have been out of school for so long, whether they're choosing remote or blended at 7 through 12, would continue to be at home and not have their education started. But
Well,
having said all
here's
that.
the deal, here's the intent behind this particular item. The board wants to give teachers, staff, as much time as they need to be prepared. So I guess what we need from, what I'm hearing from you is, you don't need any more time for in-person instruction, is that correct?
Well, I would think all the staff would say more time would always be beneficial. But what I'm saying is balancing the need of staff, what we've already published, and the needs of our community, that makes the most sense to me for the in-person, for the younger kids that are coming 5 days a week. I think, on the other hand, I think probably some of our staff would say we could use another month to plan for the other, but I don't think that's reasonable for the educational benefits. So again, if you're asking me in this moment, I would say a week is a pretty good sweet spot. I mean, Dr. Whitford, you've had a little bit of time to think about this evening, like I have.
I think the additional week, definitely 7-12, especially if we're gonna be shifting some staff, things like that. Possibly the option as we move into that for Dr. Shook to consider if we are moving people to off the waiting list and we have to hire staff for Bedford Connects because we can't make those schedules work, that we might have to take that wave of people in Bedford Connects that we're pulling off the waiting list, and we might have to start them a little bit later which I don't think would disrupt families because those children are staying home anyway. So I think maybe there's a
Yeah, and those are the
two
people
shift.
that did come onto the waiting list after the original published deadline.
Right.
And so, I
So
think
for
what you're
the-
suggesting is that for the connects, there would be a hard start date for the majority, but those that kind of came in later, we try to start them all on the same date. But if we don't have the staff, you know, almost like a rolling admission type thing, and we'll start with you as soon as it's up and running for you, but still the
And I do
intent,
think
start them all together.
right, another week for the 7 through 12 in person would be helpful as we bring these 350 on and try to figure out schedules. And the only other thought, just and we may not need it, is that we have that option if we needed to bump the Bedford Connects up a little bit while we try to get those students with teachers. If we have to hire any additional staff or so.
Okay. Of the 350 kids that are on the waiting list, are the majority of them grades set 7 through 12, or are they pretty evenly split?
It's pretty evenly split across each grade level. There's approximately anywhere from 20 to 30 K-12 per grade.
Well, I guess the bottom line is, you know, what our intent is to provide you the time you need to get things ready. So you tell us how much time you need, and we'll run with it. But,
I mean, my personal preference would be to give our team until tomorrow to really powwow on all this, take in all of this, and then publish with the discretion that you all gave us. But since you asked me tonight, if I had to make the decision tonight, it would be what I suggested. But there's a lot of moving parts here, and there's other staff we'd like to engage as well in these discussions. We don't have principals here. I think their voice is important in this, and I think for the same reason. I think they would be in the same position that I've tried to articulate. They want to make sure they have the time to do it well, but they don't want to put so much time in there that they feel like they're depriving young people of the ability to come back.
well, I mean, I'll just tell you straight up, some of the input that I've received from staff throughout the division has indicated that they would like some more time. And so, you know, I guess
Well, I think we agree. It's just about how much, and if we're committing to that this evening or not.
get her now, get you. Ms. Arston?
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just have a question for Dr. Shook. I'm curious, or maybe the transportation director. Have parents been notified of their transportation, bus routes and bus numbers? Dr. Dewis?
We, no.
No.
No. Those bus routes and bus numbers for all those who've identified that they are wanting to ride the bus, up to a point, on that feedback that we've gotten, have been assigned a bus, and the routes will be similar to years past, and we will publish approximate times, just as we usually do. It's coming, you know, it's coming quickly, especially for that elementary level next week. And we are, of course, as you know, working on childcare arrangements, and that has some implication for transportation. And, you know, we're trying to make all of that work. What we do anticipate is, because we kind of built these routes from the ground up new, you know, and not just published and said, here, hop on, we're really having to limit the numbers on each bus, is that there may be folks who ask for a late change, such as maybe there's some on the Connects who after tonight request to come back to in person, and we wouldn't have counted them into the bus calculation yet. And I don't say that in any way as an excuse. Our department's working hard and making all of these plans. Those are the last minute kinds of details that do come into play in this, and it's coming, you know, it's coming pretty quickly, so.
All right, absolutely. Just one other thing, and so certainly, it certainly sounds like more time could be beneficial in terms of transportation as well. I've heard, as many of the board members have heard from teachers and other staff members, that they are not ready. And I know teachers are feeling a high level of anxiety as they're trying to navigate and understand Canvas, the new model that we're using. And many of them, I know, are doing the best that they can in terms of understanding it. It's new, obviously, to everyone. And I know they've been quite innovative in trying to understand it, develop it, and they've actually gone to YouTube's tutorials. So I applaud them for going above and beyond to try to learn it. So with that said, I think that's reason enough for us to certainly move this date. And I would ask that we consider after Labor Day as our first day back, beginning with the elementary.
Mr. Hill?
So I've heard comments about hearing from staff. So can someone help me understand for the in-person piece, kindergarten through sixth grade, is that right? What are we changing other than the number of kids in a classroom?
Instructionally, we're not really changing anything. We have asked our elementary teachers as we move into this year to begin to learn Canvas. We're not requiring them at this point, but we want to have them prepared in case we were to have an outbreak and we were to close. We focused our training and our efforts in grades 7 through 12 because those teachers have to be online when we start. And so a lot of our elementary teachers are gung-ho though. They were signing up for training this summer and they really want to do a nice job with it. And so they're spending a lot of time trying to put really good courses together and getting their students in the routine of having access to a Canvas course so that they're teaching them that in case something happens. So I think that's probably, I think teachers want to have things really, really well done. And I think that's probably just the stress of all of that may be what you're hearing. Mr. Chairman?
I'm not finished.
Mr. Hill has the floor.
So K through 6, you've added Canvas, which they've taken this summer.
Some.
Some,
have.
okay, so some, not
We
all.
prioritize the upper grades teachers,
Okay.
yes.
So Canvas has not been given to all teachers in K through 6.
Dr. Calvert may be able to answer that a little bit
Yes,
better, but
it's been given as, the information is out there, K through 12 for Canvas for the initial training, the 4-hour training is given to everyone. It's been distributed. And they've been asked to have their websites in Canvas, but that's been the only requirement, K6, that they have running.
So do we know a completion rate of those teachers in K through 6 that have completed that?
No, I do not. I know at the module that we had, creating a virtual learning environment, as of this week, I mean, they haven't completed the final project, but all teachers in the county have started, or completed the module. So the final completion date for their turn-in of their complete module for everyone, we gave them extra time, is August 28th.
Okay,
For
and
the module to be completed.
remind me too, did we not shorten the day of K through 6 or is it a normal day?
It is short.
Okay, so teachers would have time at the end of the day to focus on Canvas or other things that,
Yes.
and I know there's plenty, I don't mean that in a negative light, but they would have time to focus on things that they need.
Yeah, and you were gonna say also that the adjusted calendar built in a collaboration day every 3 weeks.
Every 3 weeks.
And so, yeah, the first one would not occur.
So everything has been rolled out as far as what they're gonna receive. We gave priority to secondary this summer to get them in first, since we knew they were coming back in the blended.
Right.
But the elementary teachers were very zealous, and signed up over the summer when secondaries didn't sometimes.
Okay, so K through 6. And I'm sorry, I have forgotten as far as like a kindergarten teacher. So they will have 12 students in one classroom and 12 students in another?
Possibly, it's changing as, kids are enrolling and pulling and going, so, our classes are divided down, so they're socially distanced. In some classes, that's, 12, some it's.
Alright.
you know,
So
8.
what I'm understanding is K through 6, nothing's really changed as far from an instructional standpoint, other than you're requiring Canvas. We are allowing a shorter day, which gives additional time. And we've also put in an extra day on the calendar every 3 weeks for additional training or feedback. Okay, and then, so that's K through 6. 7 through 12, I'm hearing from staff that you agree that some additional time could be used, and that's for in-person, and I'm gonna get to Bedford Connects shortly, just for my understanding. So 7 through 12, you think a week, possibly 2, could be utilized for 7 through 12 because there are more online Canvas use that would change.
Yeah, and if I could say, it's really a twofold thing. You're talking from the teacher perspective, and yes, certainly teachers could use more time. I think they'd probably use 3 or 4 weeks if we were able to afford it to them. But the other thing that the delay of the 7 through 12 hybrid would give us is the time to staff up Bedford Connects and staff down some of the schools. And it might seem so simple, I just take a math teacher and move them over. But what happens is then in that 7 through 12 schedule, those sections are already kind of established. So now the principals and the counselors have to go back. And we want to do that quickly, but we also want to do it well. And so it's twofold. And I would say this as well, and I would say this is a side benefit from any delay of the 7 through 12 hybrid, even though, again, families may not like it because their kids would be starting later. It allows our teams, whether they be in instruction, whether they be in transportation, nutrition, all of our support functions, to have more time to focus on what's happening with our pre-K to 6 when the others are not in yet, and to try to get that to become more of a well-oiled machine. You all know this. The start of a normal school year is always chaotic. And one of the things that makes it chaotic is we all start on the same day. And so we're trying to support all the schools all the time. And so I think we don't disagree. It's just a matter of how much time is the appropriate.
Well, that is the question, isn't it? And so,
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to get to.
Right.
I mean, so from a K through 6, and remind me again, what is the actual start date that we have given parents?
So the scheduled start day as of this moment is the 19th, next Wednesday,
Okay.
for those attending elementary campuses, and the 20th, next Thursday, for those attending the middle school campuses.
So 19th. And so the recommendation for 7 through 12 high school is what date?
Anybody else want to chime in?
Recommendation or what we have now?
I guess I could share a little. I know I work directly with the high school principals. I think at a minimum a week is needed, because one of the things that really changes is if you pull a teacher out and they're a teacher and they're a learning coach, you then have to redistribute all of those 30 students to a new learning coach and do that well.
Okay.
And so I think there's, and what happens is that we pull more people out for Bedford Connects, or you pull students out, or you push them in from Bedford Connects. We've had some go both ways. So I think that time is definitely needed. Now, on what the sweet spot is, I don't know exactly. I think at a minimum, I think, as Dr. Shook said, August 31st is definitely needed.
Okay. But the original date was August 24th?
24th.
Okay.
Well, that was the modified. The original was the 17th.
Well, what we have set for
Right,
today.
for now, as of now, 24th.
All right,
Yes,
and
sir.
then the virtual, it would also be a recommendation of August 31st? Okay. And I know we keep talking about shifting up or down from Bedford Connect, or for Bedford Connects. But we all agree that it could also be shifting from Bedford Connects back to in-person school, right? Okay, all right. So recommendation is August 19th for elementary school, August 20th for middle school, moving the high school 7th through 12th in person out to August 31st, and 100% virtual to August 31st is what I'm hearing.
With the possible caveat that Dr. Woodford introduced about maybe not promising everyone on the wait list that they can start on the 31st.
Okay.
If the staff is not quite in place yet for that.
Well, I mean, if you need additional time, then we can certainly allow that and just let us.
I wouldn't want anyone hearing this to think, oh, I signed up for Connects, other people are starting on the 31st, why doesn't my kid starting yet? And I think our position is, we would try to do that, but we're prioritizing those that signed up by the original deadline first.
Yes.
And that's, I think that's.
Okay, so what we're looking at is 7 through 12, 31 August, Bedford Connects, 31 August, is that correct? Yes, Ms. Kirby?
I was just saying, Dr. Mealy.
Yes, ma'am.
I just wondered, I have heard from a lot of, especially elementary school teachers who are saying they are not ready. Is there any way in the next couple of days we could just canvass those teachers and find out, are they in fact, do you feel ready to go or do you need more time? I'm just concerned that we're not actually going to the people who are going to do this and asking them how they feel.
Mr. Chairman, so Dr. Miller, can you share some of the things that they're not ready? Are these first year teachers? Have they taught before?
No,
Why are they not ready to go back into a classroom that they're normally in?
Well, they just said there's things that they have, the Canvas is a big thing, and I think they're very concerned about that because at any time, really, due to the COVID situation, they could be thrown into a situation. So they really, and in order to even introduce it, they really want to get a much better handle on that. And that is a complicated program.
But if that's the case, we could react to that and not have school for those students for a certain amount of time for them to finish their training. So, I mean, I guess I need specifics to understand why teachers who have been in the classroom for years all of a sudden need more time to go back to the classroom.
Well, I think everything is so different at this point.
Well, what's different? The staff just said it's.
Well, I'm telling you what they're saying.
But I need specifics. I mean, that's.
Well, I'd have
just
to go
because I
back
don't want
actually and
to
look
is
at
not.
all the emails. No, I don't think any elementary school teacher that I've heard from is saying I don't want to at all.
So I'm asking for specifics because I haven't received those emails, so that's why I want to be able to make that same decision.
And I would say your biggest one is Canvas. I'd say that's the biggest issue with them, and they don't feel like they've received enough training, and they don't feel like they're ready to jump into that, and they want to be, because Canvas is not an easy program. It takes some time to get used to it. There are things like, for instance, that you, as I understand it, please correct me if I'm wrong, that you can't, if I've been using a certain worksheet that goes along with a science project or reading or whatever, I can't just upload that. I think it uploads as a PDF, which means the kids, of course, can't use it. So they have to recreate a lot of things.
Oh, so we can't use the same lesson plans?
No, I don't think, see, I think it's not the lesson plans. It's some of the resources that they have access to, they can't use in Canvas because they have to recreate it.
Dr. Calvert, can you reach out to the elementary school teachers and get a feel for how comfortable they are using Canvas at this particular point and identify any training shortfalls that we need to address? Okay, thank you. Yes, Mr. Johnson.
I guess I have a question for Dr. Shook and or staff. So in thinking about moving out the start date for high school at Bedford Connects, which I think under the circumstances is a prudent move, would that extra week add an extra week to the end of the semester, or would that just be a lost week of instruction? And I know this is kind of throwing you on the spot right now.
No, I think it's a good question, and I think what we would want to do is go back and revise the whole calendar and think through things of that nature. Everything is set up on a semester basis, and I'm not hearing anyone is suggesting that we're adding to the end of the school year. I don't think we recommend that at this point. We might have to come back later and do that. But I do think that is a possibility, if we're delaying a week beyond the week that we already did.
Adding a week at the end.
No, I'm saying changing the break in semester to being
okay.
done at a different time. And historically, we've tried to get that done before the traditional break at Christmas, because it, kind of like a college, it has a nice kind of rhythm to it, but maybe this is the year that we can't do that.
Between block scheduling and now exams maybe after Christmas, this is like the good old days when I was at Stanton River, so.
Dr. Hicks?
I have a question about Canvas. I may be misunderstanding how that's being used, but I understood that was mainly for 7 through 12 and not for elementary. Is that not right?
It's available to all of our teachers free from the state for 2 years. And so we focused on the 7th through 12th grade teachers have to use it, because that's one of the things we heard from parents. We needed consistency. They needed to see the same platforms. We were using multiple things. And so with that, we also said, as we get into the year, we need our elementary teachers to start learning it so that they can start moving their things over also to Canvas, because many of them have Google Classrooms or other learning management systems that they use. And so that's why we started the training focus with who had to use it right away. And now we're training those that will be using it, especially if we don't go out in a closure, it may be a moot point. But if we do close again, or once we get our one-to-one devices in place for our 3rd, 4th, and 5th graders, those teachers will definitely want to use it, because it's a great communication tool for families, and all of your work and notes and everything are housed there. So we would encourage all of our staff eventually to understand Canvas and use it as much as possible. That's what we're using in Bedford Connects too.
Okay.
So it's just to provide consistency.
But the K through 6 students that are doing in-person instruction don't have to be fully trained in Canvas on day one.
The kids or the teacher?
The teacher.
Not on day one.
Okay.
No. There'll be ongoing training for everybody, because we'll get a place and we'll find a snag and we'll have to, go back and go a little bit more in depth. And
Did you have something, Dr. Schuster?
Yes, Mr. Leamy, thank you. I think these are all really good questions and points, and there may not be a perfect answer. What I would offer is, if the main concern about going back when we're going is the Canvas piece, which as others have said, for pre-K to 6 is primarily our backstop for another closure. One of the reasons I feel like we should start next week when we planned is that we don't know if or when that closure is coming. But let's say we did know it was coming in November. I would prefer to get as many in-person days in before that. And to Mr. Hill's point, if at that time our elementary teachers still felt like they needed another week at that point, I'm much more comfortable saying to families, sorry, they didn't get all the way there in the run-up because we tried to get your kids in school. And the benefit of that is if there is no closure, then we haven't lost all this in-person instructional time. And we've got these Wednesdays and things to do the Canvas piece, if that's the sticking point, because it sounds like it may be.
Ms. Hairston?
Yeah, I just wanted to get some clarification. Again, it's a Canvas question. So were teachers told that they would have to introduce Canvas to the students on day one? I just need clarification on that.
The only thing we told them is to be, at some point in using Canvas, we want the students to be familiar with it in case we go out.
So you want them to be familiar?
Elementary, right?
We don't want them to go out and then for us to have to then teach them how to use or how to log on or that type of thing. So the very basics of how to get on and how to use it.
Right. Then perhaps maybe there's been some miscommunication or misunderstanding, because I've heard from a number of elementary teachers that their interpretation is that they need to be able on day one, which means on Wednesday, to be able to introduce campus to their students. And so because of that, they're feeling a high level of anxiety and they're concerned because, as we all have said earlier, you know, they're very ambitious. They want to make sure that they're going to follow, you know, the guidelines and rules set by the district. And so it's concerning if that was a directive given to them and they're now feeling this level of anxiety and stress because they're not ready. They're doing tutorials. They're actually going to YouTube to try to understand it and to teach themselves.
Well, and I would just say, we haven't even discussed the one-to-one rollout in 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade with teachers, because our goal would be to make sure we have computers set up, ready to go for 7th through 12th, and our Bedford Connects. So that's kind of even on a lower priority at the school level, and I think we shared last time, we even have some on back order. So that's definitely, I'm not sure where that communication's coming from, because right now, I'm not sure we even have all the machines there.
It's coming from the elementary teachers. I
I
can't
mean,
say
from
all
where
of
it's
them.
coming, to them from, because
right.
I know we've not talked about that, but
Well, can we clarify that with them?
Please,
Get
that would
this
be
cleared
great.
up?
Yeah,
Okay.
thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, ma'am. Ms. Kirby?
I, like everyone else here, we've been completely inundated with parents' emails, and I'm glad everyone is feeling comfortable to be able to get in touch with us. And it seems to me like a resounding theme is asking for the start date to be after Labor Day. And I know with the decision we made tonight, with changing over or extending the deadline to sign up for Connect, there's possibly gonna be some more shifting, which is gonna change assignments. And I have a feeling we're gonna be influxed also too, and it may just be a gut feeling, but I have a feeling we're gonna be influxed with the elementary school level. And we're gonna have to do a lot of shifting there, and that's gonna create chaos. And from a parental point of view, to hear that my daughter is gonna start on the 19th, and then I've gotta wait 2 weeks for my son to start, I would like for them to be be closer together within the same week. So if we could do this after Labor Day, like what Ms. Harrison suggested, say start one group on Tuesday, then one group on Wednesday, and move it down, but at least have them close within the same week and not the 2 week gap in between them starting. That's just my 2 cents worth.
Any other questions of staff?
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Mr. Johnson.
Not as much a question as a concern. It just sounds like there are a lot of moving parts here that staff and principals, teachers all need to kind of work through. And I'm just wondering if it may not be more prudent to just let staff, give them the direction from the board that we would like to see the dates adjusted, but then let them work out the specifics of when those dates would fall.
Any other questions? Well, do I have a motion pertaining to modification of the start date of school?
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion that we move the start date flexible within the week of Labor Day.
I have a motion by Ms. Kirby. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second, Ms. Hairston. We've had our discussion. All those in favor of moving, now so I'm clear on this, are you talking about K through 6, 7 through 12, Bedford Connects, all after
Correct.
Labor Day?
Correct.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
Please poll the board, Ms. Johnson.
Ms. Harrison?
Yes.
Dr. Hicks?
No.
Mr. Hill?
No.
Mr. Johnson?
No.
Mrs. Kirby?
Yes.
Mr. Leamy?
Yes.
Dr. Mealy?
yes.
Your guess is 3 nays, the ayes have it.
Motion passes. 2.05, stipends. Anybody have any questions for Mr. Hagler regarding stipends? Mr. Johnson?
Mr. Hagler, do we have enough data at this time to make that call, or would it be better to wait until the General Assembly reconvenes next week?
That's a good question. As I stated before, there's a lot of unknowns about our revenue. General Assembly, I know we're looking at our ADM numbers that we're seeing in Power School, but those don't always materialize. Those can fluctuate several hundred between what we're seeing in Power School by the 10th day of school. So we just don't know at this point. I know those employees would like to know. But my guidance to the board, and I'll do whatever the board wants, you're committing more than over $500,000 to pay stipends. If you decide that tonight, which you can't go back and balance the budget with, I would guide the board on waiting. We pay those out in December, and I know those employees are uneasy, but a lot of our employees are uneasy with everything we're doing. And I'd hate the board to commit that much money where you couldn't go back and do something else. For instance, and I'll not say this would come in competition, but it could. We have unallotted for a step increase. And if all the money comes in and we're $500,000 short for the step or what we're gonna do and there's no season, the board could make that decision at that point, pay out the stipends even though there's no season, or put it to this. I mean, you just eliminate that as an option to maneuver in the budget. So I do believe, and I would guide the board to wait on that, but if there's a desire by the board to go ahead and commit that for those employees, we're not 100% sure there's gonna be a season. And as Dr. Connor and I were talking today, we don't base those stipends on conditioning. It's based upon a season. So there's some complications there for outside personnel coming in. Are they coming in? Is it fairly distributed? Is everybody doing the same thing on conditioning? Everybody would just get it. And then we have to create a whole different accountability for conditioning if there's no season. So I have some concerns, but I'll do whatever the board requires us to do. The first stipends do get paid out in December, so.
When do you think you'll have enough information to?
I'll present my forecast on the budget, expenditures in October. I wait for the ADM to come in. September is our first payroll with all the changeover in our payroll. I'll have a good idea on expenses. By that time, I'll know a little bit more money about our competitive grants we've gone after for CARES. We submitted one today for over $300,000. Don't know how much I'll get from that. So all those moving pieces, I hope I have more information to say, hey, some of the things we did this summer, I got reimbursed for on competitive grants. That helps our situation. The county has made money available to us, and then we have our own CARES Act money available. So those are a lot of moving revenue pictures, over $2 million to $3 million that are unknown. I'm glad I have those as safety nets. If our ADM's real good and we have those safety nets, I think we're looking pretty good for the year. I looked at the sales tax today and for the month of August compared to last year, and it's stronger than it was last year. So those are good indicators. But the General Assembly may end up cutting some of the budget. I hope not. But they're gonna reconvene and do that. So if you're asking me when, the first board meeting, the meeting in October is when I would normally present on the financials.
Yes.
Just a quick question, because I know last week we were told that we needed to make this decision sooner rather than later, and now this week we're hearing that we don't need to make this decision till October. What happened?
You all had requested this come up last week. We wouldn't have even brought it up last week if you all hadn't. I do think we're hearing from some of these individuals, as you all are. And if we were unclear on that, I apologize. I put in the email I sent yesterday. We don't feel like this decision needs to happen this evening for the reasons Mr. Hagler stated.
Well, I obviously misunderstood then, because I was under the impression that we wanted to let those folks that were recipients of stipends know something sooner rather than later. That was my understanding of.
Well, and you may, and if you feel strongly enough about that, as Mr. Hagler is saying.
But I don't think, from what I'm hearing from Mr. Hagler, is we don't have enough good financial information to really make a call on that at this point. Yes, Mr. Hill.
Stipends, when are they normally paid out?
They're paid out at, Dr. Connor, correct me wrong, 3 different times. December, March, and I think June, May. Yeah. We try to get it into May for the 3 different seasons.
Go ahead.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
Go ahead, I didn't mean to interrupt.
Go ahead.
Okay, but I know there are teams out there conditioning now, and I heard what you said, that conditioning isn't technically considered part of it, but yes, conditioning is considered part of their stipends. If a kid athletically does not condition, work out ahead of time, you're setting them up for injury to play, and you have to condition in order to be competitive, and that's what the athletics are all about. And as far as JF and their drama department, they compete. You have to have the practices. The coaches and everybody's putting in hours. But if we don't make a decision and let them know, are they going to want to put in their hours? Because the conditioning and the practices are very much a part of coaching and very much part of stipends. And, you know, some have started conditioning now, some haven't. They're waiting to see what's going to happen. I get that. But are they going to wait even longer and deprive our kids of this because they're waiting to see if they're going to get paid for it?
I will say in the past, the out of season, Dr. Francis, you can correct me, out of season was added how many years ago, where it was,
It was
3-4 years ago maybe?
No, well, I was on the executive committee, so it was 2012-13 when out of season was approved, and one of the big things discussed was the fact that you do put coaches in a really bad situation because technically you don't get paid for it, but if you don't do it, you can't compete, and your student athletes can't compete. So yes, it's become, since probably 2013, I think was the first year we could do out of season practice. So they opened it up.
I understand what you're saying on that, but at that time when they did that, we really didn't adjust our stipends to recognize that. We just kept the stipends the same way for the season. But I do understand your point that, you know, they are working with these kids. I'm just explaining how we've done it and how we set it up in the past.
Dr. Hicks.
Could we figure out some kind of percentage of the stipend for coaches who put in the hours for the training, but then the season doesn't take place? We could. That could be something we can put into place. I think Dr. Francis and the ADs would have to put in some kind of accountability. Because if you're there coaching, you're there coaching, and we know that you've been hired and you're gonna be at the games. The out-of-season conditioning is done by the coaches, and I don't know how, I'm sure the ADs are aware of that, but we'd wanna make sure that those coaches are engaged and not pay them even a fraction maybe of the stipend. But I'll follow the will of the board. If we wanna pay out part of that, whether there's a season or not, we'll put something in place.
So is there a way to determine coaches who have been in place and are still in place versus coaches who are brand new to the role who maybe haven't arrived yet?
Yes. Connor, yep.
So is there a way that we could possibly pay the stipends to the coaches who have been in place, who have been doing the conditioning, who have already made plans for the season, who, you know, fundraising? I mean, all of that happens because we can't fund everything that these teams need. So those hours should count toward hours worked per se for that stipend. But for new coaches who haven't arrived, who haven't started day one or planning or any of that, could we possibly get a breakout to the board of here's what it would be to pay the coaches that have been in place versus the coaches who haven't shown up on day one?
Would it be the board's, Dr. Connor, that any coach that has not been in place not be allowed to come on to condition? I just don't want to create, I don't know where each school is, but if there's one school that have coaches in place and you got another team and another school that have 2 new coaches, then that school wouldn't be allowed to condition if they're not already in place. I just want to make sure I'm fair there.
I think that's why I asked if there was a way to determine. So there's not a clear yes or no. I think we would have to include athletic directors to know what varsity coaches or head coaches versus, you know, assistant coaches have been in place or working, and that's what I'm asking you guys.
We would
Is there
have
a
to
way
forecast probably the whole year. I don't know if all the decisions have been made for, you know, the spring plan and in the winter. So I guess we could put that together. It takes some time.
Right, we can identify what coaches are returning this year, have already been recommended, those that have been approved. We have some posted currently. We have some requisitions in our queue even tonight that we need to post. So it's a moving target, but we certainly have a snapshot even at this point as to who coached last year and who's been already recommended for 2021 school year, yes.
Yes.
Dr. Connor, how many current open coaching positions do we have?
I'm sorry, I don't know. I actually was looking at our teachers and paras and so forth, and I don't mean to minimize coaches, but at this point with what's going on the horizon, I don't have those numbers, but I certainly can look online and give you a sense of what's there now. Apologize.
Well, my fear is if we do end up competing and a coach does need to condition ahead of time, they're not gonna jump on a bandwagon to help these kids out if they're not gonna get paid. So these positions will stay open and it will end up hurting the kids in the long run.
I'm with you, Ms. Kirby. I mean, I think we also need to remember that there are other counties around us who are looking for good coaches, and we have very good coaches. And if they can go elsewhere and get paid, we run that risk. And so, I'm not saying that's what's going to happen, but we need to make sure the risks are out on the table as well. I mean, and it's not just coaches. So look, it's not just sports. There are a lot of stipends for clubs and for many other things that are taking place on all of our campuses. So, we just run that risk of those folks going, you don't think I'm worthy, then I'm out of here. I think that's a huge risk because those people are just as important as our teachers and any staff that we have. I mean, they spend some good quality one-on-one leadership time with our kids.
Well, and in my opinion, coaching's a year-round job. I mean, it doesn't, you've got prep time, you've got the season itself, and then you kind of got that postseason time where you're kind of looking, reevaluating, and planning for next year. So it's not like it's, there's a snapshot in time from this, point to this point. That's when the coach works. The coach works year-round, and that applies to, to Mr. Hill's point, not just sports, to performing arts and things of that nature as well. So, I mean,
Mr. Chairman?
yes, ma'am.
I hear what you all are saying, and I don't necessarily disagree with that at all. But I am concerned when Mr. Hagler says, it's $582,000. And if we commit to that, and we don't have that money, that's gonna be a real problem for us as a board. I don't see why waiting until he has the information is gonna be a hard thing. I heard from a lot of coaches, and rather than say, I'm not gonna do this, what they said was, I'm gonna do it, whether I get paid or not. And I'm not saying, coaches, please, that you should get paid. I don't want anybody writing nasty letters. I think they should, but I think we need to make sure that that money is, that what we're talking about, that's a lot of money. I was shocked, actually, at that figure. I had no idea it was quite that high.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to just kind of piggyback off of Dr. Hicks's comments in regards to paying a percentage. I think for those coaches who are actually conditioning, they've been doing this, they've just carried on, that is worthy for us to certainly consider. I, like Dr. Mealy, I'm cautious too when it pertains to our budget. I certainly would like to see more solid numbers there, but yet I certainly respect and know that the sports are very valuable in our community. So many of our students need that outlet. It helps them in so many ways, and I think it certainly supports the emotional and social and mental health of our students too, to have sports to participate in.
I was just gonna say, I mean, yes, I know $500,000 is a lot of money, but compared to a $100 million budget, it's not a big ticket item. When you look at the total number of people that $500,000 goes toward. So that's all I'll say.
To answer Mr. Kirby's question, we have 3 positions currently posted, and I think I'm pretty close to an estimate. I probably have 6 in the queue to post.
Thank you.
Can I have one more comment?
Yes.
I don't want the coaches all mad at me. I just,
Well, yeah.
I will say, well,
Look at that.
I know they're watching, but they do work all year long. I'm just conservative, I look at all the old money, I don't want the board in a difficult position. Like, what do we do? And we gotta pick one option over the other. I just try to give flexibility and guidance there. When you really look at the stipend, the state, or when they look at it from a legal standpoint, it's a volunteer stipend. You're a volunteer, here's a little stipend for you, thank you very much. Because they put in a lot more hours than that stipend pays for. So they're not paid the $10 minimum wage, because they put in a lot more. It is a volunteer stipend. So I want them to know that we recognize that, and there's a lot of hard work. I'll follow what the board wishes. I see both sides. I just wanted to present the number side and my guidance there. But I do recognize they do a lot with those kids and motivate those kids to come to school and continue to learn and do that too. So it's a tough decision, and just wanted to state that.
Dr. Mead?
Yeah, I just want to say that one of the coaches outlined her hours to me and showed me her math, and we're paying her $1.36 an hour to coach. But again, can we just not say that we agree that we will pay these people pending Mr. Hagler not losing any more sleep and saying that, that I feel pretty confident that this is going to be okay. So I certainly
that's
think
what we would be doing. They're not paid out until December anyway. So, I hear what you're saying. All right, do I have a motion to pay stipends as budgeted?
So moved.
Motion by Mr. Hill, do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Ms. Kirby. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
No?
Please poll the board, Ms. Johnson.
Ms. Hairston?
Yes.
Dr. Hicks?
No?
Mr. Hill?
Yes.
Mr. Johnson?
Yes.
Mrs. Kirby?
Yes.
Mr. Leamy?
Yes.
Dr. Mealy?
Yes.
Guys have it 6-1.
All right, thank you. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Ms. Kirby, do I have a second?
Second.
Second, Ms. Hairston. Discussion. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
We're adjourned.